بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Thank you so much for taking part in today's episode. Before we start speaking about dua and Laylatul Qadr, I wanted to check in and see how everyone's doing in these, blessed days of Shahr Ramadan. Sheikh Hassan, you're the closest geographically to me in London, so I will just ask you, how are you? How is your month going? Are you keeping well?
Alhamdulillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Well, alhamdulillah, I'm doing great. Thank you very much. I was just going to say, because I'm the closest to you, probably you should start with the rest, because you would know how I'm doing. London's been great. It's been rainy today. And alhamdulillah, everything's good. Ramadan's good. Fasting has been good, alhamdulillah. This year has been quite shorter than the other years. It's getting shorter every year. So, yeah, everything's good.
Alhamdulillah.
How have you been?
I'm keeping well. Trying to keep busy in the month of Ramadan. A lot of research. I'm not working right now, so I'm studying, researching, and obviously hanging out with you on Clubhouse a lot as well.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
It's been a very nice addition to the month. I have found those discussions. So that's been good. But I'm well. Thank you so much.
Sayyid Hassan may disagree with that, but yeah, I think we'll reserve that time for him to disagree with Clubhouse, I think.
Sayyid Hassan, assalamu alaikum. Why are you not on Clubhouse? And how are you? How are you keeping?
Alaikum salam rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I am tired. It's now been, what is it, depending on where you are, but for us, I think it's day 20, right? Because tonight here will be 21st. 20 days without caffeine. It's been rough. I mean, all right, a little bit of caffeine here and there, but not my normal cold brew routine that I have. So yeah, a lot of random issues going on in the house too. So khair, it's just a strange Ramadan, right? Strange Ramadan. But the community over here, things have opened up. So like, that's been really nice. We're actually in person again, like fully, in the sense that there's like fake masks on with people. And then the minute food comes out, it's done. And everybody's, like coughing on each other. Right? It's not like a big party. So as far as Clubhouse, I think I just recently, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that I joined or not, because I know this is being recorded, but technically I think what I have is a hacked version, because I have an Android. So I shouldn't be on it, but I am. But I just haven't jumped in any of the rooms, because the first time and last time that I jumped in a room, it was just people talking about like pakoras or what they're having for iftar. I was like, what kind of discussion is this for, a group of ulama? But maybe they were just building it up. I don't know. But inshallah, maybe I'll make a guest appearance in one of these rooms.
That was actually a post-iftar chat, because everyone had eaten, so we were comfortable with that kind of conversation. But before it's a bit dangerous to speak that much about food. And that's why you guys are before the iftar line. You and Sayyid Bilal and me and Sheikh Hassan have crossed it. So let's not speak about food anymore for your sake.
We can actually, if you want.
We'll not torture our
I'm more than happy to discuss food.
Sayyid Bilal, assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? How is your community and how is your health? What's happening your end?
Alhamdulillah, everything's well, as things are going. It's as they have been, for the past year.
Yeah, and the community is keeping well in Texas as well?
Alhamdulillah, community's keeping well. Texas officially open, quote unquote, but things are moving in the right direction, and we'll see if it continues moving that direction, barring any mutant strains or unexpected curveballs.
No, we have enough expected curveballs. So inshallah, may there be safety for the community as well, and for all the communities of people who are listening, wherever they are for this episode. So we're praying for the best for them, inshallah. And because these are the nights of Qadr as well, it is a very important time to pray for one another, for ourselves and for our goals. And that really sets into motion our discussion today, which is about dua, specifically about how we can make the most of this month, these nights, and whatever issues people are facing, how they can make the most of at least the opportunity that's presented by the nights of Qadr and the last kind of run at the end of Shahr Ramadan, so the last 10 days that are recommended for worship, how we can make the most of them. I wanted to ask all of you a very general question, which was that when people ask you about the nights of Qadr or Dua or Shahr Ramadan, and they say to you this question of like, how can I make the most of this month? Or what can I do to make this month different to others? And, there is this eagerness about Shahr Ramadan that people don't want it to pass without making the most from it. And when they ask these questions, how do you respond to them? What do you find is the reason or the solution to people making the most of the month of Ramadan? Have you found certain techniques or tips that you find yourself repeatedly giving to people? This is for anyone.
The closest geographical or the farthest geographical?
Who is the farthest
Probably
geographical?
farthest.
I don't
I don't know. It
know.
might be, it might be a tie between me and Sayyid Hasan if we go farthest.
No, you're in a different time zone than me, so you're the farthest, right?
Are we going based on mileage, or are we going based on time zone now?
We're going based on spiritual distance. You are higher than anybody else in the, I think, either the
then I should go last,
6.5 level.
All right, let me go ahead and we'll begin.
Yeah,
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, I mean, it's a very broad question, and it's a very general question that how does one make the most of these nights? Because, the advice is so varied. There's so many different acts which have been emphasized, particularly on the night of Qadr and generally in Shahr Ramadan. For example, to serve others, to give away sadaqah, for example, on the night of Qadr, to invite somebody for iftar or to feed another believer. Of course, we have the different du'as upon this night. We have the different salat and prayer for this night. But one element I kind of wanted to mention is that when it comes to these nights, sometimes I feel that our communal approach gets drowned in a quantitative aspect. And this could be said that it's a modern problem which seeps into our understanding of religion. For example, I'll often hear youths saying that, oh man, the night of Qadr is coming. So you ask them that, why do you have this feeling? Because it should be something that you look forward to. And they'll reply by saying, no, on this night, we have to pray 100 units of prayer, or we have to sit through the entire dua known as Joshan al-Kabir. So one aspect that can keep us connected upon this night is that we're looking for moments of quality. For some people, those moments of quality may require them to recite the entire dua. But for other people, you find that in one line, in 2 lines, they're able to gain that connection. For some people, it's a moment of reflection. So everyone has a natural mizaj, a natural predisposition, a natural inclination towards certain things that bring them closer towards God. And the goal is to capitalize on that. And if you go for those things, which you have that natural disposition for, whether it is salat, whether it is dua, whether it is serving others, you find that raghba and that desire will remain alive. And in that manner, you'll remain connected even upon these final nights of Ramadan, the stretch run, as we call it. And I'll leave the floor to, somebody else.
Subhanallah, subhanallah.
We'll try to keep our responses, limited to a couple minutes at a time, at least on my end, so I can hear the Sayyid and the Sheikh.
No, that was intense. It was a good pre-amal speech for myself too. So alhamdulillah, that was nice. It's tough because we have all these specific nights, right, in Ramadan. We know, okay, Ramadan's blessed itself, awesome, right? And then you have Rajab and Sha'ban. Okay, no, Ramadan has something special in it. And then in this special month, there's a few special nights. And then among these special nights, one of them is going to be super, super, super special, right? So all these little focus on this great amount of blessing throughout the year and in a few months, and then all gets kind of focused, hyper-focused into one day. And then it's as if everybody is just rushing to grab as much as they can. It's like Black Friday, or is it Black Friday for you guys too over there? Yeah. I don't know why you guys are off there. I don't know what weird cultural stuff you have.
We got it from you, actually.
You're welcome. Alhamdulillah. I don't think you guys the stampedes. I don't think you guys have reached that level yet, but
inshallah, one day.
So
when God gives you all tawfiq, inshallah.
Inshallah. So everybody has this, kind of hyper focused idea that, okay, the rest of the year, rest of the month, maybe I'm not super focused on anything. Now's my chance. I can just go grab, this like divine spree and just grab whatever I can. And, normally if you look at, I'd even say social media posts by a lot of, speakers and scholars, they kind of have, lists, just do all this kind of stuff. It's something that, for myself that I try to reflect on. And, when others ask, I try to remind them too, is that, look, it's very clear that the month of Ramadan, amongst any other time, is definitely focused on the idea of self-reflection, right? It is clear we have to get a better understanding of who we really are, of what our identity really is. We have this idea, shaitan is locked up. It's like, okay, shaitan's locked up, so we can't get messed up. Like, no, it's more that if you screw up in this month, that means it's really you. It's not shaitan messing with you. It's you. You're the screw up. Like, it's something deep internally that you're messing up. But that can also, maybe to kind of go off of Sayyid Bilal's point, is really show, okay, well, where is my fitra pulling me then? Which direction can I go on this night? If I can get an understanding, and I think there's two ways of going about it. Some ulama, I remember, they would advise that, okay, if you're the type that can handle these long du'as, yeah, okay, by all means, and recite all these long du'as, make that connection, that's great. If you're able to really go through, like, the checklist style, as some say, right? Just make sure you do everything, right? With the ghusl and the sadaqah and then the la'an and the astaghfirullah, all this stuff, do all that in a kind of successive line, and you can benefit. Okay, great, do it. But I mean, let's be honest. Most of us, who has the spiritual stamina to really do those kind of things? I mean, I'll tell you myself, I barely have enough to do the taqibat after salah. Like how much really can, effort can a person really put into all these things and really have that quality, as Sayyid Bilal was saying? I think another part of it as well is not just being attached to a certain thing and pushing that way. Some ulama would advise that, okay, if, let's say, as you know, it comes up almost every single year. It comes up around the month of Muharram regarding Ziyarat Ashura. It comes right now on these nights about the topic of la'na. And people are coming out saying, okay, well, something doesn't sit right with me with la'na. Right? I was speaking with somebody today and they were saying, it doesn't make sense. The Imam himself didn't curse Ibn Muljam. Why am I going to curse? It doesn't make sense. Maybe a part of our spiritual growth is to really find the things that we hate and despise and actually force ourselves to get, to really practice those things too, to get a better understanding. So I think if I were to put this all in kind of a broader category, if this is a month of self-reflection and really understanding who we are, then that really means to challenge ourselves in the kind of theological ways, in spiritual ways, philosophical ways, and in terms of our community involvement. Like, there's so many different ways to do that. And Laylatul Qadr could be, as they say, the night of power, value, measurement, any way you want to kind of talk about what Qadr means. I think it's really trying to say, okay, if I'm trying to determine what my real potential should be and can be for the next upcoming year, then I need to, really figure that out on this night and to start making these either incremental changes or kind of flip it on like a light switch. Like, you know what? I need to completely flip the script on how my spiritual life has been progressing, if it has been progressing at all, and see which direction it really needs to go. And usually, as I think people really need to do, is if you've got a local scholar that has seen through your spiritual journey, I think that's the best person to really tell you on this night, Sayyid so-and-so, Sheikh so-and-so, or brother this or sister that. This past year, if you've been struggling with this, as I've seen, you need to start focusing on this on Laylatul Qadr, and then for the rest of the year, having those general and then kind of spiritual prescriptions. But I want to see what Sheikh Hassan has to say.
Ahsantum Sayyid and Sayyid Bilal. There were very great points mentioned. I'll just add a couple of points to it, and just as a form of a ta'yeed of what you guys said. What you said about there's this kind of mentality in our communities about quantity over quality, and we see it a lot. And if we want to be very honest and truthful to ourselves, when we look at our day-to-day lives, a lot of the times it's about quantity, and we even define whether a person is a good person or not based on the number of things they do rather than based on the quality, which obviously quality in many places is not really clear for us. We wouldn't be able to see a person or evaluate the quality of the action that they're doing, but mainly it's the quantity. So having that in mind, I know that why a lot of the times we may lean more towards the quantity aspect of an action rather than the quality. But I think the mistake that we make is that when we're judging other people, yes, we don't have access to analyzing the quality of their actions. But then when it comes to ourselves, it's as if we're not really, because we can't see other people's qualities, it's as if we're not looking at our own actions and the quality of our own actions. And we only focus on the quantity. And even I was thinking about this the other day, and I said that we are, in a way, our minds are so contaminated by this, to the extent that when we see narrations such as narrations that in the month of Ramadan, if you recite a single verse of the Quran, then you will get the thawab of the entire Quran, reciting the entire Quran. And narrations such as this, that has a potential to be understood in both ways, emphasizing quality and emphasizing quantity. You see, mostly it's used to say that, okay, if reciting one verse gives me the thawab of the entire Quran, then reciting the entire Quran, how much thawab does it give me, right? While I was thinking about it, I said, what if we understand this narration in a different way? What if we say that this narration is saying, hey, oh, you, Bani Adam, who always basically 11 months a year are focusing on quantity and you're so obsessed with that. If you recite just one verse of the Quran in this month, don't worry, I'll give you the entire Quran. What if the narration is actually trying to say that if you're looking for thawab, your thawab is guaranteed. Nawmukum fihi ibadah. Done. Right? Thawab guaranteed. Sleep in it. You're going to get your ibadah. But there are some things that you need to work for, and probably sit down and think about those. Now, going into the discussion of dua, there's lots of interesting points we can perhaps discuss here. What Sayyid mentioned about reflection, I think that's really true. And knowing exactly what we want, pondering, going through contemplation, one of the keys of istijaba of dua, which probably if you guys want, I can open this up. There's this very interesting topic. The question that many people ask is that, why is it that our du'as are not answered? I know people who, because their du'as are not answered, they left Islam. I know a person who did that. I know a person who is struggling. I know, like, when you sit, with people, and when we go through this kind of level of honesty, then it always comes out. It's like, why should I do du'a? The other day, someone messaged me on Instagram saying the same thing. Like, why, I just told, like, it's so interesting. Like, I just said, yeah, please remember me in your du'as. And then I received this very long message saying, no, but my du'as are never accepted, and so on and so forth. And I said, okay, it's very interesting, because I understand that. I understand it. In Farsi, we say with my meat and my bones. It sounds so wrong in English, probably, but
you should have stuck to the Farsi.
I know. For some reason, I'm finding a bit of a connection with Farsi idioms these days. For some reason, they kind of, I don't know, they're close to heart.
This one, it mentions meat, and the brothers haven't eaten yet. So maybe, let's not ponder
maybe I'm
into
trying
the
to be a bit cheeky here, but yeah.
It's possible.
So the thing is with the problem of dua, then, there's a question of why are dua not answered, or is there a guaranteed istijaba for dua in Islam? This is a question. Like, are we even to expect? Did God anywhere say that if you do dua to him, he's going to answer? He's going to give you what you want from him. One of the conditions that are mentioned here is that you need to know what you want. You need to have you need to have a true request, dua. And again, I'm going to use a Farsi poem here, like a piece of poem that says, Ab kamju tishnegi avar bedast. Says, stop seeking, or seek water less, work less on trying to seek water, but first develop thirst. Because when you develop thirst, then you'll know what you want and you'll be directed towards what you want. But then when you're trying to seek water so much without really being thirsty, that's like not really knowing what you want. And probably one of the things good in Ramadan that we can focus on that prioritizes quality over quantity is that we can sit down and think about what is it that we really want and which part of this journey towards God we're on. Because if we're not honest with ourselves, we're just reading, as Said Bilal says, and Sayyid Hassan said, you're just reading and reading so much quantity, but how much do we really connect to it? I'm just going to leave you guys there with the thought that, yeah, quality over quantity, inshallah, would be probably good. Although there are some of the scholars I know that emphasize that 11 months a year is about quantity, but when it comes to Ramadan, it's 11 months a year is about quality, but when it comes to Ramadan, it's only about quantity. There are some of the scholars who say this. But, me coming from the Hausa background, I try to kind of do jam of every two conflicting understandings or views that I hear. I really think about this and I say that, okay, even if that's the case, that's probably for the person who 11 months a year is really focused on quality and knows what they want, and then Ramadan, they invest in that level of ma'rifah that they have reached. They invest in that and they add quantity to that level of quality that they have. But if a person hasn't gone through that realization yet, probably on these nights will be the good kickstart, inshallah, for sitting down and seeing where in this journey we are, even if it's way behind what we thought that we're in. Inshallah, yeah.
I mean, I think the way that you talked about like Kickstart, I think that's essential because, as I'm sure you've seen, because obviously the quality versus quantity advice, that's been something now, us having moved over now in the West, that is pretty much the new sort of quote unquote cliche advice, basically, right? Not to demean it, but to say that yes, people in the East, their thing was, look, just get it done, just recite it, and then you won't burn in hell. That was basically the idea. Us transitioning over to the West with immigrant scholars and parents, there was like this, how do we reconcile these ideas? And then slowly but surely, a few scholars came and said, look, maybe that way has its value in XYZ environment or conditions, but let's start shifting over to quality. And now pretty much it's all you hear. I mean, you mentioned like some of the scholars, I don't want to, kind of throw them under the bus, but it seems like all we're hearing now is quality, quality, quality. And the quantity part kind of gets just, it's become like the new quality for us. And, I'm always apprehensive as somebody who, again, living a sort of irreligious life when I was growing up, and then going to the Hausa and still being irreligious there, and who knows what's going on right now, is to not replace one extreme with another, which I think Westerners may, especially the youth, may get kind of in the habit of doing, saying, you know what, I'm just going to delve into the nuqta under the ba for the whole month of Ramadan, and I won't go to any other verse of Quran. Like, well, okay, maybe that's a little too much. You can recite a little bit more. And, we had a discussion with Sheikh Salim Bimji a little while ago, and he was saying, why can't people do both? Why couldn't you do the quantity part, meaning try to finish the Quran? You can do that. But as you're doing that, maybe focus on, one surah or, a few ayat or something like that. So you're getting a little bit of quality and quantity at the same time. I think the other thing which is interesting to note as well is, so, normally people are talking about the checklist stuff, like, just do all these things, try to get as much in as possible. And, I wish people would kind of reflect on the irony, because this is the last thing anybody should be doing in Ramadan. When you're breaking your fast, the last thing you should be doing is stuffing yourself. We think that's exactly what we need, which, empirically speaking, no, we're not supposed to be stuffing ourselves. We're supposed to, if you really want to benefit from a physical fast, you keep it light. Spiritually, of course, same thing. This idea of people just packing in all of these du'as on one night and then leaving that night just like that, for me, it seems like it's the exact same thing. Is that, look, maybe it's okay. Maybe you got, again, some of your acha bacha good boy points or good girl points on this night. That's fine. But if you're actually looking for something greater, packing it all in like that and then leaving doesn't seem like it has much value. And I remember some teachers would mention that point specifically. They said, look, if you're not a person that normally would recite long du'as before Ramadan, maybe it's not in your best interest to recite it in Ramadan as well, meaning on Laylatul Qadr, because that's not your spiritual type. Maybe Dua Abi Hamza is not for you, because before you got tired halfway or maybe a quarter way to Dua Kumel. Why would you do any of these long du'as? It doesn't make sense. So maybe you have to focus on the shorter ones, right? So this is like one perspective I've heard. It's as if somebody thinks that they can eat healthy or go to the gym, one day out of the year and say, you know what, I purified myself. I'm clean now. I'm good to go. Now the rest of the year I can go do what I want. If, again, like I like the way that Sheikh Hassan, you were saying it, if it's a kickstart to say, look, this is going to be almost like in a sense of a New Year's resolution type thing. This is the first day in my new spiritual program, or to bring in the Farsi pattern, right? This is how I'm going to be starting now. Okay, fine. That makes sense now. I want to start from this night going forward, reciting X amount of du'as or this length du'a, or whatever it happens to be. A person can, I think, define that for themselves. Although, again, I would say take the ego out of it. Maybe try to get an alim or somebody that's your spiritual counselor to, prescribe that for you. But if there's nobody around, then at least more introspection could lead you to figure out, okay, where should I be improving in my life? Because I think nobody would disagree that the more of the ego that's removed, especially in a spiritual program, the better that would end up being. And usually it's the other way around, where our ego is actually the one that's kind of defining what we should be doing in terms of our spiritual journey. So I think that maybe is a part of Laylatul Qadr that usually hasn't been mentioned on the member too often, unless you guys have heard different.
I think a key point that both Sheikh Hassan mentioned and Sayyid Hasan as well.
The Hassanain.
Huh?
The Hassanain, both Hassan.
Hassanain, Sheikh and Sayyid, is that we really oftentimes we fall into the trap of maybe making overarching statements, whether it's in the quantity and quality approach, or whether it, for example, that the Sheikh gave is in relation to the acceptance of dua. I've heard many people that they say that if you do X, Y, and Z, your dua 100% mutlaqan, without any raib, without any doubt, will be accepted. Now, many of these people are saying this innocently, and of course, maybe they might be saying it based on traditions, because we have traditions, for example, that say that a dua which begins with Bismillah will not be rejected, for example. But there is a outcome and a ramification in practice. You have to think from the other angle. Now, that person who was given this quote unquote guarantee, if he goes and he follows that prescription and his dua isn't accepted, you find that person may go through a theological crisis, a crisis in understanding. So, you know, to summarize my point, I think we really need to get to the crux of what is dua. And we need to understand what is the nature of dua. And over here, I think it benefits one to understand the literal meaning of the word dua. You know, oftentimes one of the challenges of, you know, translating religious terminology into English is that much of the religious vernacular in the English language is embedded in Christian theology. And alhamdulillah, dua is one of the cases that where the word for the most part remains in the original language. Most people, they say dua. And there's a type of nuance you understand from the original word. For example, I'll give you another example. The word talib, we just translate it as student, you know, the one who is a student of knowledge. But at the core of this word is the word talab, which means to go seek. And that's what knowledge is. It's not egalitarian that everyone receives it. One has to go and seek it. But when you look at the core of the word dua, you find that it means to call upon Allah. Da'a yad'u is the verbal form of it. And this is why those scholars who tried to understand the physical world from the metaphysical and spiritual realities, they would say that the life of a human being is nothing except what is between dua and najwa. Now, what that means is that when a person is born, you find the first thing they do is they cry. And this is the form of calling. This is in its own form to call. But at the final moments, when all your faculties, they begin to wane and you're becoming weaker and weaker, what's the final thing you do? You whisper at that moment when your energy is going. So you find everything is in this reality of dua and najwa. And if we understand dua as calling upon Allah, then at that point, our focus won't become whether we receive or we don't receive. We'll understand dua as that medium to connect with God. That's why Rasulullah says, ad-dua mukhul ibadah, that the core of one's relationship with God and the core of ubudiyah and servitude is dua. And the famous scholar Sayyid ibn Tawus, he has a famous book called Falahus Sahil, the success of the one who asks. And he says really quickly that dua is a mixture of da'wah and mas'ala. It's a mixture of one's own needs and one calling upon God. You know, we find that many people that, you know, they feel loneliness in their lives, even though they may have everything from the material perspective, monetarily, they may have family, they may have people around them, but even then they feel loneliness within that. We understand it's because within our nature, we're seeking a connection with a higher reality, which is Allah. And at that core of that connection is to call upon him. And you find these are, you know, some points about dua, otherwise there's much to say about it, but I'll let, you know, the Sayyid and the Sheikh add, critique, whatever they find appropriate.
No critique, but when you said mas'ala, I thought masala. So
No masala, you know, we're getting closer to iftar time.
that rosa's hitting. So Abbas, we've done a good job of keeping you quiet for at least about a half hour or so. Let's hear your dua.
My dua is for both of you all three of you to live a long life, inshallah.
But hold on. I don't want to.
Make sure you meet the conditions for that dua. You know, that's an important dua to be answered.
Okay,
Some of us might be nihilists here. We may not want to live very long, so don't make these assumptions.
that is the least controversial dua for someone's afiyah. How can you critique? Fine, khair. What?
You're doing with Housawi's here. Of course, we're going to critique every single thing that comes out here.
That's true. No, fine. One thing I was thinking about in that point was that, because you mentioned this actually, Sayyid Hassan, about someone should go to a scholar or someone who has been observing their spiritual journey to advise how to use these days if there is anything to benefit specifically from them, like what's good for you. And the theme which comes from all of your points is that it is very subjective what a person can and should take from this month. It depends on their own personal journey, their spiritual type. Somebody mentioned, like, is sadaqah the way they talk to Allah, is certain long du'as the way they like to communicate, is doing different athkar, like what works for them. And then it's, I guess, building a plan or building a very like a schedule which reflects what they need, not what other people will judge them for being spiritual or religious. So I wonder, in setting your own spiritual plan of what do I want from this month or what do I want from these days, how do we hit the sweet spot of giving ourselves a challenge for this month, but not being too cruel and asking too much of ourselves and judging ourselves by these lengthy du'as? We don't want it to be easy, but we don't want it to be too hard. What is that balance in being productive spiritually?
I don't know if I should be answering this question because it probably is still a question of mine, and it's very difficult to be able to know because, like, I've seen some advices by some of the scholars who say that do it until the moment that you feel you're pushing it, and that's the moment you need to stop. And then some of the other scholars say that no, but that could be the shaitan. So basically you need to be principled. So you can't be, if you do that, then probably, if you apply that to a lot of the things that you do, or even the obligations, then you'll just feel like literally you don't want to do anything. So there definitely needs to be a balance between principle, I think, and so being principled and basically listening to what your heart wants. For me personally, I think that what helps me, and I'm going to share it, maybe it's going to help someone else as well, and maybe it doesn't, I don't know. Inshallah. But for me, what helps is that I really focus on the fact that I listen to my heart and I listen to see what is it that I want. So it's the autonomy part of it, the ikhtiyar that God has given me. I really tend to focus on this personally, and I'm trying to be very conscious of the fact that when God has created this universe, if you look around yourself in the material world, there is no autonomy, there is no ikhtiyar given to people, there's no free will, right? You don't decide whether the tree grows, you don't decide whether the sea is the sea, you don't decide anything around yourself. Yes, you may, have this illusion of like, I'm actually changing things in this world, I put this here, or that's the story of that, our beloved head teacher by Sayyid Hasan. The head teacher used to say the story. They said this guy was, I love those stories.
Ya Allah. Bismillah. Oh boy.
So this guy, in Urdu you call these lotas, right? In Farsi we call them aftabe. So in Iran, when you travel between cities, in Arabic as well?
Shatafa in Arabic.
Shatafa, ahsan.
I want to say what it is in English, but I don't think they have it in England. So maybe translate it for the third language for our listeners. Pot.
Dollar store watering can, basically.
Watering can.
Yeah, so basically, in Iran, when you travel from a city to a city, on the way, on the journey, you see that, there are some areas, that for example, there's restaurants and services, etc., or bathrooms. And when you go there, it happens very often that you see a person sitting there at the door and he's got all these pots of water, because obviously in our culture, when you go to the toilet, we wash ourselves, right? And then you've got all these, he's put them all out there and he just sits there. And when you want to go in, you're like, okay, I just want to get, so sometimes if you don't ask his permission and you just take that one pot, let's say, he's going to look at you, he's like, no, wait, put that down, take the other one, right? And you just say to him, but what's the difference? They're both the same, right? But he's like, no, it's all about him making the decision of saying, hey, don't take this one, take that one. So sometimes we have this illusion, right? we have this kind of thought in our head that, yeah, we actually have a say in this universe and so on. But the only thing that we're doing, we're probably putting two things next to each other, and then what happens is what happens, right? It's not in our hands. So the fact that 95% of everything around ourselves is predestined, and even when it comes to human beings, when you take a kind of bite of something, that's probably in your hands as what we think, right? But then when you swallow it, the rest of it going through digestion is not even in my hand, right? I don't decide for that even. So that one aspect of my life that I think that God has gone against principle in a way that the asl was, the principle was that everything is predetermined, everything is not controlled by me. But then he created that one, he went against the rule, that 5% here. He kind of decided, he's like, no, I want to make sure that I give ikhtiyar and free will to people. And when I look at it that way, for me personally, when it comes to religion, when it comes to doing dua, when it comes to a lot of these things, I tend to give myself the right and say that if I am praying, let's say, even when it comes to language, I tend to, when I'm obviously conscious of it, I tend to use these words. I don't say I need to pray. I say I want to pray. Like, for example, we're outside with people who are like, yeah, I have to pray. No, I don't have to pray. I want to pray, right? It's different. It's very different when you say that to yourself. And then when you say I want to, then you're, I think, much more conscious of what is it that you really want to. And so kind of the balance between quantity and quality for myself personally comes that I need to know what I want. And sometimes when I am clear about what I want, I'll put the effort to bring in the quantity where it's necessary. It's painful sometimes going through becoming principled. And for me, like, it's probably, I think, much harder than many other people I've seen out there, because I was never brought up as a principled person kind of thing. I was very free, whatever I needed to do, I wanted to do. And it kind of, like, I wasn't kind of forced into anything in my life. I can't remember, at least in my in my upbringing. So it's hard. It was very hard for me when I went through Hawza, first years of Hawza. They used to tell us, wake up at night. You have to. It's very important. Read Salatul Layl. And that's the moment that as soon as they would say you have to do it, that rebellion personality of mine would come out and say, no, I'm not going to do it because you say I have to, type of thing, right?
So when I told you have to come on a podcast with me and you said no, like, that's what that was.
Well, probably, or maybe as a position of a teacher, I wanted to test your patience, right? And see, or maybe try to push you into perfection and getting closer to being more patient. You never know, right?
Thank you.
Probably I wouldn't know as well.
Now I end up saying thank you, but fine, thank you.
Yeah, you'll have, yeah. So that's what happens with how.
Exactly. That was
students,
sharp.
Yeah, you sometimes have to say thank you to your teachers' insecurities, right?
Especially when they're not really good teachers, you don't really like them. You still have to say thank you. Like, yeah, thank you, Mr. Roushendal.
No, but I like him,
whatever you call him.
I like him. Thank you.
So, yeah. So.
But it's a good point. What your point is, you have to be really honest. You have to be brutally honest with yourself when you're making that balance, right?
Yeah, because it's painful. I think it's like putting in work, putting in an exercise or putting in some effort in a workout, or, it's going to be hard sometimes, but you need to be very, very clear with yourself that you're doing it out of your own will and it's not forced. And you're kind of, for me personally, and I've seen it in many people, I've actually given this advice, even this Ramadan, to some people. I say, work on this, see if it makes sense to you or not. It's the moment that, when you're reading a dua, you're like, okay, the first 10 lines is so nice, maybe even some tears come out. But then you go to, probably dua Josh and Kabi number 11, 12, 13, and it's like, for example, Ya imada man la imada la, it's like, how is that? Like, really? Like, suddenly sometimes doubts even come into your mind, the places where you haven't solved in theology. For me, it's like that moment you have to stop, right? Because that is not doing you any service. You're pushing something which inside your heart, it's not right. You're not sure about it. And let me just share this thing as the last thing. It's very interesting for me when I saw a definition of the word juhd in the Quran. The Quran says, kafaru bi ayati wa jahadu biha. Jahadu. there's an understanding, a general understanding that people have, is that they say juhd means something when a person denies something, rejects something that they know it's true in their heart. I saw a definition of this, which was very, very interesting for me. There's a continuation to this definition that says, yes, inkaru ma fil qalbi ithbatu. Inkar means rejection, rejection of something that inside your heart you accepted, you know it's right. And the opposite, wa ithbatu ma fil qalbi inkaru. And approving and saying yes and saying, you know, validating something that inside your heart, you don't believe in it. So that moment that it comes in the dua that you say like, hey, you know, Ya imadam Allah, seriously, you're the pillar of someone who does not have, you're the friend of someone who doesn't have a friend. Like, I don't believe in this. I really maybe don't believe in it in my heart. But that moment, I would say stop and probably go through this reflection in that moment and say to God, like, God, I'm reading this dua, but this is not really my words. If this is true, please let me understand it. Please help me feel it. Please help me believe in it if that's true. I want to go through that experience, that realization that when I read this next time, I really feel it and I believe in it. So that from 10 verses, I go to 15 verses this time, that when I read, I feel in peace and in, you know, calmness. I'm very sorry, guys. I sometimes, you know, lose track of time. I need to put my phone in front of me. Sometimes, yeah. Mujibid juz'iyya, please. Don't, yeah. I hope it hasn't reached the kulliya yet.
Oh man.
Yeah.
You know, it's so both what Abbas was saying and what you, Sheikh Hassan, was saying. So anytime I hear the word subjective, there's a part of me that always just wants to vomit and cringe, right? Because obviously, not to go off on a full rant, but you know, we're living in post-modernity and probably post-modernity. Everybody's talking about self-care and my truth.
I knew you taking this direction.
The notions of relativism, they come out.
I knew we have to
Abbas,
go here.
this is your fault. You shouldn't. I mean, well, I can blame Sheikh Hassan for some of this stuff too. Look, I'm not discounting what both
Bilal,
of you guys are
I heard
saying.
you. Don't you start either, Bilal. Let him finish,
Oh, no.
and end the point.
Let the Rizvis take this now to where to its utmost peak.
Said Hassan's like, I'm not what did you say? Disregard?
I don't know.
I'm not disregarding. I'm not disregarding everything that he's saying. I'm just rejecting everything that he's saying.
I'm doing inkar of what in my heart I know I can't. I don't accept it. So the reason I meant the idea, you know, the point about having somebody else outside, like a spiritual teacher, you know, advise about a'mal, is because especially in this time, I guess I mentioned the word self-care. That's on everybody's mind right now, right? Mental health. Okay, self-care, you have to take care of yourself. Have your spa day or go to the gym, whatever it is. It's almost as if religion now, specifically a'mal and ibadat, Laylatul Qadr, people are treating it like some religious divine self-care, right? That this is my time now. I'm putting everything else aside. I need to get done what I need done. And I'm sure, again, I know Sheikh Hassan, you probably didn't attend this specifically, but I always have this worry on whenever people look what they believe is looking inward, introspect, reflect, and come out with something. Because let's be honest, how many of us have actually been trained in proper introspection or reflection, right? We know amongst most of the ulama who deal with this, you know, the concept of tafakkur and open it up, that, you know, most of us we still haven't even recognized the fact that that voice that we usually hear in our heads probably isn't the real us, you know, whatever that means. It's these, you know, khawatir or, you know, shayateen or maybe whatever. It could be a million different things. And we are still, most of us, in that mode of whatever is there is me. And that's it. And we kind of go with the flow. So when somebody has that internal reflection, which they think is a reflection, and, you know, they hear either start this dua, continue this dua, stop here, do that. As I think, Sheikh, you were talking about too. It could be shaitan. But do people really have that early warning satanic detection system? I highly doubt it. Especially when it comes to theological, spiritual issues. Most of us we're not really trained in that sense. Otherwise, it'd be going off constantly for a lot of us, especially if we're having these basic theological questions. So again, I always just, I don't like to do ihtiyat, right? Especially for food, no ihtiyat, right? Just go in. If it's halal, find a loophole and go eat and drink, be merry. But when it comes to a person introspecting about their spiritual journey and struggles, that I say, you know what, I don't know. Just because of the fact that really is where shaitan wants to jump in and kind of mess up our journey. You know, how do we really know and recognize what is best for us. I don't know if that's possible. I mean, I don't think I can figure that out. Look, to have that, most of the urafa or even ulama of akhlaq, they talk about the value of sidq, right? Of truth or sincerity or honesty, however you want to translate sidq. Normally, when you hear it, you have the typical sort of mimbari answer is, sidq, be honest to one another. But one of our teachers, I remember, he said, look, that's for children. What do you mean be honest with one another? Don't tell lies. Yeah, that's an easy thing. But can you be self-honest, honest with yourself? That's a very difficult thing to do in spirituality. To really say, as I'm introspecting and looking inside to say, look, whatever is coming to me right now, that's just my ego. That's not actually me. I don't know if that's really what's going to be beneficial for me spiritually. How am I supposed to know something like that? And again, the only reason I'm saying that is because I think we've all talked about it. I think we're pretty much all on the same page in that regard. But I don't think we want to get people caught up in any sort of extreme. In the sense of as they're performing this tafakkur and they're thinking about, which part of the dua connects with them or doesn't connect with them here and there, they could be taking an easy route out, perhaps, right? Or they could be pushed away because of shaitan or some egotistical desire to push them away. I mean, I'll give you my own example just to kind of keep it there. I have been advised by many teachers as well that, when you're reciting Quran, the minute that you see yourself start to pull away, right? Okay, you should stop right there. But I've heard other advices as well that you should go up until the point where you actually still enjoy. And you know that the enjoyment is there, but it's not as much. And then you stop. Why? Because there you're going to long for more. You'll still have that raghba, right? That desire. You're going to want to come back eventually. They give the same advice for writing a paper or something, right? Like, don't stop when you have no ideas left and you hit writer's block. Keep writing. And even if you have an idea left, stop there so that you have something to come back to right away as well, right? So, I mean, there's like a lot of different approaches. And again, I don't want to go into, I know, say, Bilal, you mentioned relativism. So I don't want to go into that as well and say that that's what's being pushed here. But it's clear that for every single nafs, for every single ruh, for every fitrah, there's going to be a different approach required for them. We may have a few different things because of our, I don't want to say expertise or whatever, but every individual, we have some basic superficial level of what is good for us and bad for us, very clearly, right? If somebody's lactose intolerant, they should know whether they should be drinking milk or not. That should be very obvious. Whether that same thing happens in spiritual, whether we know whether we're spiritually tolerant or intolerant to, that I don't know how many of us are actually really in tune with or in line with. So, Khair, I want to see what Sayyid Bilal has to say about this too before I continue.
No, I think it's a very interesting point. The whole idea of, trying to figure out what is right and wrong based upon an internal feeling and what we feel in the heart, it works for those, who have what we say fitra salima, who have an unblemished predisposition, but most of us don't. And it's not our fault all the time. I'm not saying that we're terrible people, we're going out and sinning on our own, all the time, but it's the influence of society. There are so many things based on the influence of society that although the Sharia has allowed it, it may feel something which is wrong to us, or vice versa. So, it's very important over here that, one goes to the Quran, the Hadith, the corpus of dua literature. Of course, there's many discussions that can be had about which duas to recite, which I don't want to get into, but there's a difference between trying to take an understanding from it and superimposing our understanding upon it. And that's something which we really need to be careful of. And it's over here that, these feelings of right and wrong based upon who has influenced us or based upon our own spiritual background, they really, influence these feelings.
But there must be some wisdom to that designation of do this dua on this time, do it on this particular day. For the one who fulfills the conditions, like there must be some benefit to those things, right? We're not taking that away.
Without a doubt, if there are many traditions of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt that emphasize that a particular dua, has a great value to be recited at this particular time, whether it is dua al-iftitah after the time of Maghrib or dua Abu Hamza al-Tumali, for example, in the month of Shahr Ramadan. But at one time, at one side, it doesn't mean that it should be limited to that time only. There is a flexibility that you can recite it outside of that time. But at the second level, it doesn't mean that that is the only act that you need to engage in within that time. Yes, there is wisdom. It's mentioned within the traditions. But I think opposed to the word subjective, I guess maybe the better word is the discussion about whether the recitation of dua is formal or informal. One definition that's given for dua is prayer. And we can have a discussion about whether prayer is appropriate or not. But we find that, prayer, as it's understood, there is a formal element of prayer and there's an informal element of prayer. And this is something which I think S.M. Jafri, who wrote the introduction of Sahifatu Sajjadiyah, he makes this point that, if we really understand what is the formalized version of prayer, if we use this word, it's really salat. Salat is really has an outward element. And that's why we find that the laws of Sharia govern salat, that salat must be done in this manner. There must be a niyyah, there must be an opening takbir, there must be qiyam, sujood, ruku, all of these elements which are necessary for salat. But when it comes to dua, there is flexibility. It doesn't have that level of formality. And oftentimes people nitpick traditions and they say that, okay, this tradition says this, thus you have to do it in this manner. Or this tradition says this and you have to do it in that manner. No, we have different traditions and we need to have an encompassing picture. For example, some traditions emphasize the personal aspect of dua. For example, the famous tradition, the Hadith al-Qudsi that says, Ya Musa, salni kulla ma tahtaju ilayh. Ask me everything that you need, even if you need grass for your sheep or salt for that bread which you need for that dough, ask me for it. This shows that, when it comes to our personal needs, we can ask Allah. And there is a level of informality. We should never feel that this is too small to ask for from Allah. But at the other side, we have many traditions which emphasize the communal form of dua. And we see within the duas of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam that there really is a communal undertone towards those duas. For example, dua al-Arafah. Now, of course, many duas were there on the spot, but we can see that many duas, just by their title or just by the descriptions associated with them, are associated with a particular time to be repeated. So the point I'm making, just a khulasa, I don't remember where I started and where I ended up, but just a khulasa is that, there is a level of informality with dua as well. And we shouldn't escape that, and we should keep that in mind with us. If the Sheikh or the Sayyid have anything to add to these points.
Well, so, one discussion that interested me towards the end, in our studies in Qom. So normally because I know that there are some personalities out there that are introducing sort of counter mainstream narrative ideas in terms of dua and ziyarat and things like that. And they have their own reasons for why they're doing that. And I know that's not our topic or subject of discussion. But one thing that one of our teachers had mentioned was, the sort of normal system that we have, the way that we approach kind of epistemically the corpus and the collection of dua and ziyarat is that here's a list of stuff in XYZ books, or here's all the narrations. You got it from so-and-so, narrated by so-and-so. There it is. Now it's for all the Shias to recite. So a lot of ulama, and I don't know how, from what I understand, it was a minority trend in Qom or in the Hawza in general. And I think it may be increasing. That I'm not positive about. Maybe the other two ulama can explain. But in terms of this and other sort of ideas as well, even the advice that, let's say, a member of the Ahlul Bayt would give to somebody that we then take and turn into a whole lecture series about how to, transform our lives. So these ulama would say, look, these are specific prescriptions that the Prophet or the Imam is giving to the person who's asking them. We have come out of nowhere, grabbed this tradition out of context, and are now applying it to a whole group of people. And the analogy, of course, the very simple one is that most of you know, I've been doing keto for like 3-4 years. And, I don't hold back on the preaching of it, but there's a good reason for why that's the case.
We know.
Do I believe that?
Don't worry.
Oh, okay. Especially in Ramadan, man. But would I say everybody needs to do it? Absolutely. I don't think so. Because physiologically, neurologically, there's going to be differences. Now, are there general points, let's say, is in a keto diet that I think everybody needs to apply, meaning reduction of complex carbs, or maybe not even complex, but high glycemic carbs and highly processed foods and sugar? Absolutely, that needs to be done. You don't have to be keto for that necessarily. So there's parts of there that anybody can apply. But keto specifically, okay, it's benefited me based on XYZ reasons. For somebody else, maybe a paleo or, I don't know, carnivore diet or whatever happens to be, vegan or a whole food, plant, or whatever different types of diets exist. So there's these shared ideas and then there's specific ideas. If, somebody saw my therapist or my personal trainer or my doctor, and they grabbed the advice they gave me and then started applying it to everybody else, that would be, obviously ridiculous. Nobody would do that. But it seems as though we've done that for the Ahlul Bayt as well. And again, I don't want to mention examples because that can splinter off into a whole nother difficult discussion. But there are many of the famous a'mal and du'as, which in the actual narration, in the the chain itself, or in the actual the text of the narration, it says that this is not for everybody to recite. It says it there very, very specifically. Although if you go on like du'as.org or any of these apps, that part is omitted. It's just the text of the du'a or the ziyarah. But the imam, when he's telling this companion, he's saying, look, this is not for everybody, so don't go and tell this to everybody. So a lot of the famous things that we are in the kind of habit of doing may not actually be designed for everybody, but because of the nature of the publication of these works, now it's meant for everybody. So I think a part of, again, the relevance for this discussion is that maybe there are going to be certain things which are not meant for everybody. It's been listed in this whole list of prescriptions of things to do in Ramadan or on the nights of Qadr, or this specific dua for after Maghrib or whatever. But maybe that's only meant for somebody with a specific spiritual disposition, because the Ahlul Bayt had known that person's disposition. That's why they mentioned it to them. Is it really a good idea for us to take that, generalize it, and apply it as a universal principle? I think that's something worth re-examining and thinking about. Again, I'm not saying that has to be applied all across the board, but it may be a kind of precautionary principle that people need to do if they're especially going to, on these nights, or in general for any dua or ziyarah they want to recite, maybe this was meant for somebody to reach a certain spiritual level. So my goal now is to reach a level where I can recite XYZ dua or this specific thing. If I'm at that level, okay, so my goal is to build up the prerequisites and the preconditions so that I can be somebody that can recite a dua like that, and that would actually help me in my spiritual growth. Where as of right now, it may not actually do anything for me at this stage.
Yeah. Abbas, would you like to add anything here?
I was going to flip it straight to you, Sheikh. There was a particular point I wanted you to speak on, but if you have a direct response, then Bismillah.
No, please.
It was about this idea that a dua might not just have no effect, but it might have a negative effect on you if you do it incorrectly. And the point I wanted to ask you, based on what Sayyid Hassan just mentioned, was how do we encourage people to be responsible in the du'as they recite and the spirituality, in the practices they do? How do we encourage people to take responsibility for what they should and shouldn't do, rather than the idea that it's just a free for all and read this, read that, you'll have this response? Like that mentality, like how do we shift it to that vision?
Assuming he agrees. He may disagree with it. So if he's going to disagree, then let him disagree.
No,
he may not want to shift the mentality. He might want to shift me out of here.
No, Sayyid, it's good. It's good to have a balance, right? Sometimes, I take the extreme on one side, and then it's good for you guys to bring me back.
Yeah.
So I just realized that I've been answering your questions mainly, Abbas, and then the two honorable guests here have been literally just taking it from there and adding their points to it. And I was like, why am I answering first? It's quite complicated. But
I mean, usually what happens is that the non-family members of the Ahlul Bayt would say something, and then the family members to come and
the Ahlul Bayt would react and bring it back on track, right? Wow. So let me take it off track again right now, and then we'll have the...
Sorry, you walked into it. What could I have done?
Right? So
that is strong.
You're the Sayyid, right? So I'm not a Sayyid. So let me just cause the damage, and then you guys just, control it. So basically, you see, Abbas, I think personally, again, these are like, I should have said it in the beginning, but I think it's important for the audience, whoever's listening to this, just listen to whatever everyone is saying here and see which one suits you better. It's not necessarily the fact that one is right or one is wrong. And definitely it is the fact that neither of us are giving a complete understanding or an absolute, haqiqa, truth version of things. It's just our reflections and our understandings of it. So I'm just putting this out there. Obviously, it's known by most people. If it's not known by some, or it's just a reminder for some people who already know. So the thing is, I personally think that what's important in the case of dua, there's few things. Number one, we have manners of dua, right? When you look at the Quran, it's like the mentality is so interesting that you see that when it comes to the prophets, when they do dua, how they do dua, and then when it comes to the, let's say, sometimes it compares, right, to the followers of the prophets and how they did dua. And everything, I think, goes back to the mindset. The key point is the mindset. How do you think about the concept of dua, and what do you believe about it? When in a narration that I think Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, it's narrated that he was asked, why is it that our du'as are not answered? While the Quran says, ud'uni astajib lakum, and so on and so forth. And it is said that the Imam has responded by saying, لِأَنَّكُمْ تَدْعُونَ مَنْ لَا تَعْرِفُونَهُ. Because you are calling upon the person who you do not know him. Now, the mindset is so key. You need to know who you're calling upon. And then also next after that would be, you need to know how to call upon him. And then when the mindset is correct, then the mannerism would come, it would just kind of come after that. It would follow it. When it comes to the mindset, I think it's so important that when we look at the Quran, it says, يَسْأَلُهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Everything that's in the samawat and ard is asking from him. This asking, this request, it stems from the inner poverty of everything, because everything is mawjood, is existent, and they are in need of the wajibul wujud, the necessary existent, right? And this poverty says, the Quran says, it describes it as يَسْأَلُهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Then you say, okay, if everything is asking, yes, everything is asking subconsciously, and even insan, when we have narrations that say if you're going even to another person, you're in reality asking from God. But it's just a matter of being conscious of it. So for insan, it becomes that you need to become conscious of the fact that when you do dua doesn't mean, so there's so many misconceptions of dua. And I think the problem that we have is that if we have the wrong understanding of dua, it doesn't cause us benefits. And yes, maybe these hocus pocus stuff I don't know about really. They say they recite it this many times and the cheshm that is on you is going to go. Maybe you do it and maybe the cheshm is going to go. I don't know about that. That's not my field, and I haven't researched it much. But when it comes to a person's growth, the personal growth, and none of those subjective relativity, whatever that was mentioned, look at it from a different
be
angle.
Careful. Watch your words carefully. We're watching you.
Yeah. So when it comes to the personal growth, it's about the mindset. The mindset is key, I think. And when you look at the fact that everyone's in need, like, it's so beautiful to see that. When I read in Shaykh Mutahari's work, he said that what is the haqiqah, what's the reality of dua? Is the dua, the purpose of doing dua is that, okay, I do dua, I'm asking God for something and therefore God giving me my request? Or is there something else going on here? So why, or the purpose of dua, why should I even do dua? He says the haqiqah, the reality of dua is inqita', is detachment. What's the meaning of this? It's that in order for someone to reach the destination of dua is what we believe to be is that I want to get what I want from God, right? Oh God, grant me this, oh God, grant me that, etc. He says you need to have a mindset, and the more you can be able to be detached, the more you will reach the destination. Where does he get this detachment from? It's from the verse in the Quran that when many people say, okay, do we have, God in the Quran says, if you ask me, if you call upon me, I respond, right? وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. If my servants ask you of me, I am close. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. I respond, I will give to the person who calls upon me, I will respond to them. If you ask me something, I will give you. The narration says God is greater than, he is basically subhanallah exalted. Like, you can't think of him to be a person who has opened the doors of dua, but then he closed the door of istijaba or ijaba. So you can't think of him that way. If you do dua, he gives you, right? So if that's the case, then why are we not getting it? When you go to Allama Tabatabai's understanding of these verses, he says that although this verse seems like God is giving you a guaranteed version of, the verse is giving you a guaranteed istijaba, answer to your du'as, but it's not. He says it puts two conditions here, And the reason why, this is Alama Tabatabayi's approach. He says the reason why our du'as are not responded is because it doesn't meet these two conditions, either both of them or one of them at least. Condition number one is that it needs to be a true dua. I mentioned initially, it needs to be the real request and true dua of the person and not just by tongue. And number two, which is very important, it needs to be directed at God. It needs to be detached from everything, every means in this world. And therefore, when I talk about mindset, is that when you realize that the reason why we do dua, as Sayyid Bilal said very nicely, ask for your salt, ask for, some people may ask, oh, that's just useless. Why should I do that? I'm just going to go and buy salt from the shop. But we're not trying to say to you, okay, say, do that and then sit at home and then, you know, the salt will miraculously come and, you know, be delivered to your house. Although that wouldn't be a miracle, that would just be called Amazon today, right? But still, it's not that. It's the fact that creating the mindset to say that when you're asking God is seeing everything in this world, yes, everything is means and you're going through the means, but seeing God as the ultimate means, seeing God as the one who has put everything there. God is in control of everything. So inqita, detachment. Shaykh Mutahhir says the reality of dua is detachment. If you create the mindset of detachment, then he says it's very beautiful phrase. He says, look, some people have experienced this in their life, that they've gone through desperation, moments of desperation where I'm completely detached from everyone else. I have no hope. And I truly say to God, oh God, please save me of this. I'm done, right? He says those people who are very skeptical of dua, even when you ask them, has there been a moment in your life that you felt like, you know, I got what I wanted? Some of them, I'm not saying everyone, but some of them may say, yeah, there had been like maybe once or twice in my life that I really asked God for something and he gave it to me. Shaykh Mutahhir says that's because they have reached this level of inqita. He says the reality of dua is inqita. Some people involuntarily or unwillingly are put in a situation that they reach the level of inqita, detachment. Some people, they do it voluntarily in their life. So even in the places of not being detached or desperate and not being desperate in their life, they put themselves in a situation, in a mindset that they truly believe that everything is in the control of God and we are all depend on God. And therefore, if the mindset is created, is in the right, if you have the right mindset, I personally think that gets us closer to the reality of dua. Then we can benefit from dua. And then if we do reach that detachment and the haqiqah of dua, then Alama Tabatabai says that there is a guaranteed istijaba there. So this took a bit long, but I hope that I've clarified this understanding. I personally think that dua can cause a lot of damage. It's just my personal view, the way we do it in day-to-day life if we don't have the right mindset. And it has caused it. You don't need to believe in my own words. You just go and speak to people and you see that there's one of the areas where everyone's got a problem with. Almost everyone's got a problem with this dua. Is like, oh, my duas are not accepted and they don't know how to think about it. I hope this probably maybe sheds some light on this topic, hopefully. Yeah.
Alamas is a very useful answer to that very question of why is my dua not answered. You can literally ponder on those two conditions and think about them. But I feel like in this discussion we've been looking a lot at what's the balance between these two extremes, and here we've seen another extremity, which is in asking Allah for every little thing, and we've seen the benefits of that, and then asking Allah for these broad life-changing important goals, this being the beginning of the spiritual year. And the question I'd like to ask all of you is, if someone is deciding and going in with a plan of what do I want to pray for, and they're fulfilling those conditions, yes, we want to pray for all of the little things because Allah is in control of every aspect, but also He's in control of the direction of the course of my life. And people at this point will be thinking, what should I pray for? How big can I think? How lofty should my goals be? And what I'd like to ask you guys is, if someone is thinking about leaving this month of Shahr Ramadan and making some dua that is long lasting, how big can they think? What is a reasonable enough or unreasonable enough target to set for yourself? What is our capacity to take from this month? Or I'll put it in this way, what is the capacity of this month to give the person who has prepared for it?
Or
Hassan,
maybe
I
you
know,
guys can just continue with your damage control and
no,
ignore
no,
this question.
but let's no, no, no. We want to shift. We want to be productive. We wanna get something. We want to start pointing the direction towards
The
productivity.
question is, it's quite difficult in the sense that, what is the capacity of the month of Shahr Ramadan, and what is the capacity of the human being who is made the vicegerent of God upon this earth? I mean, this is that month, as the tradition says, that you have been invited to the banquet of Allah over here. And what a person receives when they are a guest is in accordance to the capacity of the host. Over here, this is that month where Allah is the host. And the human being is that creation of God whose capacity far outweighs any other capacity amongst the creation. So in that sense, I'll let the Sayyid answer that portion of the question. I found it quite difficult on my own reflection, but in terms of what to ask for on these nights, a systematic person goes importance by importance. That which takes priority, he'll mention that first, and that which comes after, you find he'll mention in that order. I mean, and it's just quite logical. For example, if you ask for monetary wealth, then you'll say, okay, I may have monetary wealth, but if I don't have health accompanied with it, then what is monetary wealth in front of health? And then you may say to yourself, okay, I have physical health and I have a well-being of my body, but what is the value of the well-being of the body if I'm just using this body in a way to take me away from Allah? So you may ask at that point for an understanding of Allah. I mean, ultimately, when we go up the pedestal of what one should ask for, and of course, as we, I think we hit the nail on the head more than one should, there is always a personal element, but there is also that, formalized element. Ultimately, we are seeking, ma'rifatullah. We're trying to seek understanding of Allah. And that's why certain ulama, they said that the greatest thing one can do upon this night is mudakaratul ilm, to have a discussion where one acquires knowledge, particularly knowledge of the unity of Allah, and by extension of the Prophet, of the vicegerents, of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and you find that gains a priority. But one's mindset should be that they're thinking at the bigger picture. Yes, the tradition says ask for whatever you want and go towards Allah, and we should have this ability within us that whenever we receive something, we ultimately see it as receiving it from Allah. That's why the Urafat, they said that, there is nothing except God and nothing is desired except for Allah. And that's a very strange statement, because you may think to yourself, okay, that person who doesn't believe in God, how is it that that person is desiring Allah when he doesn't believe in Allah? But you find that there is a natural inclination and an innate drive that every single human being is seeking perfection. Some people, that perfection is limited to this material world. Some people, by the value and the power of revelation, they see perfection as something which is far beyond this limited material world, and they will ask for those things which allow one to progress within this spiritual path. So I hope that sheds a little bit of insight.
It does. Priority. Sayyid Hassan, what is the priority then?
I don't want to say what is the priority, but so I was reflecting on this earlier today. And so, normally when we are reflecting or thinking about Ramadan and Laylatul Qadr, and everybody's like, what is the most important thing? It's obviously a question that everybody's asking for. Or the way, I like the way that you phrased it as well, right? Like, okay, well, we know that, and Sayyid Bilal, nicely outlined it for us. The potential to benefit from it is unlimited because we're asking the infinite. So that's clear. But okay, well, I'm this finite, messed up person. What am I supposed to do with all this infinite stuff at my disposal? Well, that's the key is, okay, well, what really is then at my disposal? What part of the banquet, of this buffet, this divine feast do I have access to or not? And so I was reflecting today and I thought, okay, we obviously, when we reflect on Laylatul Qadr, besides the A'mal part, the Quran part of it also comes there too, meaning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in being this receptacle, this container for the Quran, right? And with the most sort of famous opinion of the full Quran descending onto his heart on Qadr, right? So, I'm thinking about this and saying, okay, we're talking about insanul kamil, the most perfect, right? As much as you can be in terms of a, if we're going to throw out wajib al-wujud, let's talk a little about, the mumkinat al-wujud, right? So the most perfect mumkin, the most perfect contingent being, of course, being Rasulullah, right? In that personality. What he does or what he can receive and benefit from on the night of Qadr, all right, al-mabna, obviously, but what we most believe in is that the full Quran, all of reality now is descending into his heart. The full playbook of reality is coming onto his heart and soul. So I think that point is like, okay, a person upon achieving such a level, all of reality then is at their fingertips, so to speak, in that sense, right? So when I'm thinking about that now for myself, I'm like, okay, yeah, obviously it's a long way to go, right? Not too common yet, right? We got a few other things to do before we become perfect human beings. All right, so there's very different things to ask on Qadr. And I was looking through a few narrations the other day, and I think, Abbas, you had probably mentioned it. I think everybody had mentioned it. Say, Bilal, I think you had just mentioned it as well, about well-being. And I believe one of the narrations talks about, somebody asking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam what to ask for when they reach or they get to Qadr, and he says, afia. And afia normally is, again, our mind immediately is jumping to the physical stuff, right? Okay, I don't want COVID. I don't want a variation. I want the vaccine, right? It's automatically going to jump to the physical stuff. Some of us, okay, may say, all right, especially nowadays, we jump first now, I think maybe to mental health, because that's on everybody's mind too, right? All these seminars and discussions about Islam and mental health or whatever that means, right? So then they're thinking, okay, I want the physical stuff, and I also want mental well-being. But if you look in various different books, whether it's talking about it from a lughawi perspective, right, a linguistic perspective, or looking at all the other hadith which address the topic of afia, having afia and this well-being in one's deen is something which seems to be underlooked as well. And I think some of the points that all of you had mentioned was that, if we're trying to get into the system, I want to ask Allah the right things. I know I'm in need right now. I need some stuff. I have to make the right things my priorities. So what should I do? I think still the reflected part, the part of that which, that I that's still there is really causing us those blocks. Meaning that we're looking at it from down up. Like, okay, what do I need from Allah? Whereas perhaps maybe the idea is, okay, Allah as the Khaliq, as the creator of the cosmos and of everything here, there's that sulh and that proper harmony that he has in mind, right? The way that everything needs to reflect his names in the most perfect manner. If we were to really understand Allah in his true infinite perfection and understand the names and how names manifest perfectly in all situations, then we would know exactly, when we come back down to our level, okay, in this situation, this is how I need to start manifesting, right? This name here and there. Maybe I'm not reflecting this name properly. I need to work on this, right? To put it in more, this would be more in the terms what Urafa would probably use, right? Because normally nowadays, we don't really speak in terms of names of Allah in that sense, I don't think, right? In terms of manifesting or reflecting those names. But I think maybe applying that to the night of Qadr in terms of priorities, maybe another paradigm shift that would be beneficial to some, to say that it's not that, maybe my tawakkul is off, I need to work on that. Or maybe I need to research more about barzakh because I don't know about that. Okay, look, these are little, I think, small particular issues. Again, if we take this other paradigm shift to say, look, maybe, alhamdulillah, Allah has provided me ease and convenience, and I have well-being in terms of the fact that I can manifest, let's say, ar-razaq or ar-razik really easily. I have no problem in giving and taking care of my family or my friends or my community. I donate. I do all this stuff, alhamdulillah. Or, I can manifest al-wahhab. Like it comes easy to me because of, let's say, spiritual disposition, which has been inherited from ancestors, and, all that discussion which comes into play there. But maybe, again, now going back to, I think, Sheikh Hassan's initial point, upon reflection, I think it's very clear that I have some anger issues, or maybe I do have this lackadaisical, lazy attitude in ibadat. Whereas maybe in the month of Ramadan, because I know I think I need to eat, so I wake up for suhoor and sehri. I make it a point to make sure I wake up an hour ahead of time. So I do that. I get my proper micro and macronutrients in, so the fast is easy for me, right? That's what everybody does nowadays. And alhamdulillah, a lot of people will also try to start getting into the habit of Salatul Layl, because like, I'm up, I can do it, right? That's also, it's awesome. If you can do that, it's wonderful. Then what's interesting is on Eid, when now Allah's saying, look, the training wheels are off. I gave you a month where I forced you to keep away from material desires and needs. I forced you to focus on yourself. Now the training wheels are off, like that forced spiritual training is done. Now, what are you going to do with it? In fact, I mean, perhaps that's probably why it's haram to even engage in this practice of fasting on Eid. Because look, training's over. I want to see what you're made of now. Like this is it. Are you actually going to wake up now before Fajr? If there's no suhoor and sehri in mind, no spiritual, I mean, no physical nutrition in mind there, are you going to continue with praying, let's say, even Fajr at, awal al-waqt? Are you going to still continue in your practice of Salatul Layl since you've been doing it for so long? Or now are you going to go back to your previous mindset, which is that, no, I need to get my proper sleep in time. I need to have my coffee or whatever it is, how we were, how we had changed ourselves in the month of Ramadan from what it was before. And we're kind of just going back to that, previous form. So I think if a person's able to engage in that sort of thought process and reflection on Qadr, right? And as Sayyid Bilal was saying, and they're able to even, let's say, discuss with other individuals whom they look up to in the fact that they can reflect these traits that I don't have. There's another brother or sister in the community, a friend or family member, and they have that trait of strong iman, all the time. Maybe I should sit down with them on this night. Now, I don't want to say instead of reciting dua, right? Again, I don't want to put it in those sort of extremes, but maybe, instead of like a shura, mushawara, sit down and say, look, I want to, on this night of Qadr, I know I've reflected and I've really figured out that I have to work on XYZ things. I know that has to be at least one of my priorities. So in line with that priority, not just thinking about it and making dua, which is necessary, making dua, Allah, please set up the means for me to get there. Well, I need to start reaching out to the individuals in my life that have actually achieved that and do that, right? I mean, since I'm seeing Sayyid Bilal's face, I have to use this as an example too. Nowadays, everybody is trying to figure out which crypto to get into, right? All of these, random currencies and how to go in terms of investment. And this, I'm not bringing that up to say that Sayyid Bilal gives ijazah for that or not. Let's just say that the topic has come up a few times, right?
Wait, is he about to get cancelled? Is that what's happening right now?
No. He's among the ulama who understands a certain way that ar-razaq and ar-raziq needs to be reflected. Let's put it
MashaAllah.
So, if somebody were to do that, look, they can make dua, Allah, please, protect my blockchain, or I don't know, some like whatever dua like that. But if they're actually not doing the real work on the ground,
guests that know each other from before.
Bilal, can I have an appointment of mushawara tonight, please? Since you encouraged it, Sayyid Hassan.
See, Abbas, this is the matchmaking that you've made possible. May Allah bless
all
you for
listeners who use a certain promo code will get a discount in their next purchase through just say Sayyid Bilal in the search bar.
Yeah, I'm going to remain silent over here.
No, but I mean, the point is this: is that, listen, a person can say deep down in their heart, I feel a connection to Bitcoin or Ethereum or this and that. Like, well, come on, like, personal connection's not there. It's not about what's in your heart. You have to do the proper research. Ask people who, again, assuming that your Maharaja allows this sort of stuff in the first place, right? If you're allowed to do that stuff, then okay, fine. But make sure you're going. This is a discussion that usually comes up when we talk about istikhara, right? Is if you're looking to find khair, it's not just about, this tasbih or open the Quran randomly or ask somebody to do that. Look, there are steps required to do that. And again, going back to a lot of the initial points you mentioned, my fear is that a lot of us use Laylatul Qadr or dua as a replacement for the practical stuff that we need to do. Meaning, I know that there's this issue. I have this deficiency. Well, I need to start really thinking about the practical steps to get involved. Whether that means something simple like reassessing my dietary habits, or if my alarm does not work for Fajr and I keep sleeping through it, I really need to figure out, even if that means researching the science of sound, figuring out how do sounds affect the human being in terms of maybe this sort of alarm is not helping me out because of the certain frequencies or the keys that are being used, right? Because that's a whole scientific empirical discussion there. Maybe that, blaring alarm sound is not good for me because it turns me off and that doesn't make me want to wake up. But if I put on, the nice sound of Sayyid Bilal reciting dua, maybe that'll get me to wake up, for example, right? But yeah, I think I don't want to go on anymore. I think I'll
even more. No, but there's an interesting point. There's something that that just came to mind, that oftentimes ulama in the commentary on the famous hadith, talabul ilm faridatun ala kulli Muslim, that seeking knowledge is incumbent upon every Muslim. They say what is meant over here is ilmul hal, what a person needs in that particular state they are in. Now, this has been construed at one angle of the knowledge of the jurisprudential needs that we have based on the different encounters that we have in our lives to know that. But as the Sayyid had mentioned, there can be an element of construing this term that based upon our own journey, there may be certain areas that I need to give an understanding of that differs from what somebody else needs to gain an understanding of. And in that manner, I'm seeking to, perfect myself. But I'll let, Sheikh Hassan go. I know it was his turn over here, but I just had to interject with one comment.
There's no turns here. No.
There's no turns over here. We've been respecting.
It's a circle, it's a cycle. It's everybody's turn all the time. It's just one unified
big square.
There's only Tawheed.
Ahsant.
MashaAllah. Sheikh Hassan, do you have any
Wal
thoughts on...
Hashimiyyu awla, as they say.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Wow. But for Sheikh Hassan, like, what do you think about that?
About what?
About no, cryptocurrency. No. No. About this point that we need to know what the meaning of dua is and do all of that work, and then prioritize, and then like aim big, aim high. Like the question I asked in the beginning, like give yourself a real approach of who is offering and what am I going to take from him, like that mentality.
It's like, I'm just going to share a couple of points that comes to my mind. And I've recently been focusing on this a bit more and seeing how possibly the way we've been brought up or taught perhaps in our communities is very, I would say, alien to what I see in some of the du'as that we have from the imams. It's like, for example, like, or I think the status of the person really determines which part of a du'a they focus on or they find attractive. Like, if you're really a person who connects with God through fear, then you're only going to be seeing the parts of the du'a that really magnifies God's punishment, and you're always going to be attracted to those aspects of religion. And then if you're a person who's very kind of, I would say, Rahmani, very nice, like a teddy bear, then you're going to be liking God's Rahmani part a bit more. But like, when I started thinking recently about the whole sifat of mu'min, it's so interesting to see there are some qualities that it's very rarely been talked about. Like, for example, like I looked at this topic of that, what's the narrational or Quranic perspective on whether a mu'min is a sad or a happy person, right? What's the perspective of the Quran on whether a mu'min is a person who has any, like, so is a mu'min a person who is confident, or is a person who's scared and not confident? And then when you look at it from that perspective, you come across verses or du'as, you're like, wow, it's so interesting. And then when it comes to the same question that you asked, for example, there's this part of the du'a, it says, وَلَا يَزِيدُهُ وَتَزِيدُهُ كَثْرَةُ الْعَطَاءِ إِلَّا جُودًا وَكَرَمًا. It says very clearly, it says, look, you're asking a being that the more he gives is not going to decrease anything from him. He's not going to lose anything, but it's going to only increase in his generosity. So if we are dealing with such a being, and then in some other du'as it says, I can't remember the Arabic right now. It just talks about how, from what we know of you, O God, now this has kind of encouraged me, and as'alaka, to ask you something that I know I am not I don't deserve it. But why am I asking you something I don't really believe I deserve? It's because I know that because it's you. In lam akun mustahilan lirahmatik, if I'm not deserving of your mercy, فأنت أهل أن تجود علي بفضل سعتك. You are, the reason why I'm asking you is not because I see it in myself. It's because I see it in you as a being. Looking at all these du'as and saying, wow, like this should be something that even if I'm in my worst situation in life, if for a second I think of God and I say, oh God, maybe God is even tired of me, right? I've been doing tawbah and breaking my tawbah so much. Or what if, if I ask God for like, I don't know, a $100 million, if that even exists, house or something. No, but that's too much. The moment you say too much, you're literally attracting this kind of idea, or you're basically injecting your thought to the reality. You create your own realities. I don't want to sound like these motivational speakers tonight, right? But in many places, and I say it's going to die now, but in many places you create
citing
realities.
The Secret?
Right, you create certain realities, and I think that's why in a lot of these du'as, before you start even doing du'a, you have a phase in the beginning of the du'a, all those phrases of glorifying God and making it so God-centric. Du'a Kumail at the end of it mentions some very beautiful du'as, but before that it goes through this whole process of ma'rifah, so that you know who you're calling upon, so that then when you do your du'a, that du'a is more effective. I'm just going to share this interesting story from the story verse in the Quran.
Not a Farsi idiom, right?
Well, I'll get to the idioms after, if I may, please.
Bismillah.
Fine, okay.
So this verse in the Quran, it's so interesting. It talks about Isa and the Hawariyun, the disciples, right? When they came to Isa, the way they spoke to Isa, right? Instead to Jesus, instead of saying that, oh Jesus, for example, call upon God and something like that, or in a nice way, or even they themselves do du'a. So this is like a difference between the way the disciples addressed a particular du'a request that they had, and then the way Isa did it. When they came to Isa, they said, they came to him like, قالوا هل يستطيع ربك أن ينزل علينا مائدة من السماء. The first thing they said, they questioned the fact that, can your Lord do this? Instead of saying, oh, he can, and glorifying him. No, the first thing that came to their mind, can your Lord really send down upon us a ma'idah from the sky? قَالَ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. The response, Jesus says, hey, have taqwa of God if you have iman. What kind of question is this? And then they were like, no, but you see, the justification is beautiful. It's like, قَالُوا نُرِيدُ أَن نأكل منها. No, we want to eat from it. وَتَطْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبُنَا. We want our hearts to be, strengthened and firm. And so on. وَقَالُوا نُرِيدُ أَن نأكل منها وَتَطْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبُنَا. I can't remember the continuation. Two more things. وَنَكُونَ عَلَيْهَا مِنَ الشَّاهِدِينَ. So we want to be witnesses of it. And then now Isa addresses God and goes to God. It says, قَالَ عِيسَى ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ قَالَ وَقَالَ اللَّهُمَّ. I can't remember the beginning of the verse. It's a bit rusty mind now. قَالَ اللَّهُمَّ رَبَّنَا. Look how he starts. Oh Allah, our Lord, please, أنزل علينا مائدة من السماء. Send down upon us a ma'idah from the skies. تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا. It describes it. He's like, look, this is the reason why I want it. This is, let's kind of be sure about our intentions of why we're asking this. وآية منك, a sign from yourself. وارزقنا, oh Allah, give us rizq. وأنت خير الرازقين. It's just the language that it uses. It's like وارزقنا وأنت خير الرازقين. Oh God, give us, and you are the best of the rizq givers. Like this comes from a mindset that believes that, number one, God can do it. Number two, it doesn't decrease anything from it. And it's all about the connection and the tawakkul that a person has on God. So just to answer that question, there's no restriction there is no restriction. So, since Said Hassan doesn't like Farsi idioms, I'm going to
نعم بفهم
mention a
شغل.
story. I'm going to mention a story by Saint Augustine, right?
Wow, that's a really extreme reaction to dislike of Farsi.
Yeah.
What, are you going to do it in Latin?
I'm catering for the audience. Well, he's not the audience; he's the host here. So basically, the story says, St. Augustine says that I was doing this like contemplation, reflection, and so on, and I was calling upon God so much. And he said, I suddenly got this revelation or inspiration. This voice told me that in order for us to hear you don't need to shout. Like in some of the majalis, recite the third salawat louder, or bring your hands up and recite it so loudly. It says that you don't need to shout in order for us to hear your request. But in order for you to hear our voice, you need to be quiet and you need to stay silent. So that second part of it is that God is da'im al-fadl ala al-bariyah. God is his fadl, his mercy and everything is always there. There's nothing lacking from God's side, at least from a philosophical perspective. I know the Kalamis like to say that God can choose whether to do it or not, but the philosophers would like to say that no, he always does it. And it's all about our capacity that, it's all the lack of what we have. So whichever one you want to agree to, it's the fact that God doesn't have a problem giving. It's about the capacity of receiving. And in order to increase the capacity, you need to go through silence. In order to hear the voice and to receive, you need to be able to go through the silence that's required, probably. And by you, I mean us, everyone in this world. And we're all in need of this. I hope that kind of answers.
You started to go silent too towards the end. You were like going like this. You did that on purpose for dramatic effect, didn't you?
It was a nice transition.
Don't give away my secrets, Sayyid Hassan.
He's a real professional.
أنا من أصحاب السر.
I wanted to, that was actually a very beautiful point, and I thought it was beautiful enough to close the discussion on. But before I do, I wanted to ask if any of you wanted to expand on a point somebody else mentioned, or ask a question to somebody else that they mentioned something you want them to expand upon. Were there any points that you thought needed explanation or you were curious about? Or shall I close this?
Like, I personally benefited a lot from what you guys mentioned, and it was a really good reminder for the things that I already knew, and a very good education for myself for the points that I had missed in my readings and learnings. So thank you so much, guys, and please keep all of us in your du'as, inshallah. Make sure you go through the 2 conditions before that, though. But yes.
But then I would ask you, Sheikh Hassan, the question I was going to ask everyone. You can be the first person, which is, if people are listening today before the night of Qadr, or in the nights of Qadr, like the 23rd, which is coming up, what is one piece of advice, either from today's discussion or in general, that you would like to give to the listener before they go for the a'mal, before they go for the nights of dua?
It's so difficult to give advice because I don't see myself in that position to give any advice. I just kind of sometimes I repeat my own personal experiences, and sometimes some people find it useful. I just saw one of the great scholars, I saw it yesterday, I think, that he gave an advice to those people who are basically going through Laylatul Qadr, and I will just share that. I think that's a very interesting advice. So he was like, more than doing certain actions on that night, we're in need of wiping off certain things that are blocking us from connection. So whether they are sins, which are basically tahbisu dua, they are kind of keeping the dua down and not allowing it to ascend. So he says that on these nights, obviously we don't have that much time as well. It's not like I can call everyone who I have broken their heart. It's not that I can reach out to every single person that I've done ghibat of, or I've, slandered, I've revealed their secrets. There's so many things that we may have done that we don't have that much time of doing that. And they definitely have an effect on our spirituality. And it's not something just overnight going through Laylatul Qadr we can fix. So he said that, but know that Allah is all merciful and Allah is greater than keeping you from the experience of Laylatul Qadr just because you've gone through those things. But he says you have to do a couple of things. Just make sure you kind of be determined and make this promise that on that night, make the promise that if there is such a thing, after the Laylatul Qadr, I am going to go and I'm going to reach out to those people. So first of all, do istighfar, and if there's anything that's you need to make up for, just make the decision to do so and make this promise with God so that God removes those things that have blocked your capacity of receiving. This is something I found very interesting from him, so I just thought to share.
Alhamdulillah, that's a beautiful point. Sayyid Hassan, Sayyid Bilal, any advice which you would add to that for the dear listener?
I mean, we've covered so many different pieces of advice, but there's a tradition of our ulama that if they wanted to start a new work which was beneficial, they would either begin it on the night of Qadr or they would make the intention to begin it on the night of Qadr. And that's something which I think we all can learn from, whether that intention is to change ourselves, whether it's to begin some positive work, that there's great barakah upon beginning on the right day and the right time, and there's no better time than the night of Qadr. Because really, the night of Qadr is that night which connects the previous year to the next year from the spiritual and metaphysical level. Everything that was decreed on last night of Qadr, and of course there is free will, I don't want to get into what is decreed and all of those nuances, but that continues until the next night of Qadr. So we see that the night of Qadr really is a connective vessel in time to the next year. So, it's a night of great barakah. The Quran, says better than 1,000 months. So utilize this opportunity, make the intention, and inshallah, God will give barakah within your decision and in your intention to carry it out.
Inshallah. Sayyid Hassan, can you close us off? Bismillah. What is your piece of advice for the listener?
Ya Allah. When you go to somebody's house, an auntie's house, maybe it's a relative, and there's all that food there, you have your limits and you eat, and then what does that auntie tell you? Neberta, you have to eat more. So they seem to know our limits better than we do, and then we end up finding the space. Now, I don't know how blasphemous this will be, but it's almost like Allah is the divine auntie right now, inviting us for the feast and saying, look, I'm plumping you up, and you have a greater capacity than you think. And if we're talking about Qadr in that sense of trying to, self-measure, self-account, figure out what we really are capable of, then one thing that I think we can try to, and I definitely for myself, I know I need to do this, to try to get out of our vocabulary is, as sometimes we are in the habit of saying, is, this is the best that I can do. This is the best that I can do right now. This is the most I can do right now. And it almost feels like that's an insult and an unjust remark to Allah, to say that this is, because what you're really saying is that's the most that Allah's really provided me to do, which is a disgraceful thing to say. But on the night of Qadr, you can say, look, I'm removing and erasing, because Allah has given me the ability to do so, my previous misconceptions and assumptions about myself, because Allah expects and has given me has a better plan and greater plan in mind for me. And I'm going to, this is now going to be the first day for me to kind of expand my existence and to really, eat more, spiritually speaking.
With those beautiful remarks, we end today's episode, the special Shahr Ramadan episode, and encourage all of the listeners to remember us in your dua. Sayyid Bilal, Sayyid Hassan, and Sheikh Hassan Roushandel. The main advice that we give is to make the most of these nights by truly considering what we want from Shahr Ramadan. We know that the one who gives is infinite, but like we discussed in today's discussion, one must find a balance between the approaches which would be too extreme to be productive. For example, like we said, between being qualitative and quantitative, we want to perform actions that give us value, dua, a'mal, but we are not setting ourselves these tasks of performing X number of actions just for the sake of performing them. We want meaning. Similarly, when it comes to theory and practice, we want to make sure that we are doing dua and we are praying in these nights of Shab Qadr, these nights of power, but we're also performing actions to try and better our situation. Similarly, if there are two extremes in which a person is overly theoretical and they are not focusing on the practical, we want to find ourselves in that sweet spot in between. And there are other things that we discussed about what the meaning of dua is, that relationship with God that all of us have. We pray that you, the listener, remembers us in your dua, um, and allows the night of Qadr to help you in your dialogue with Allah, using this as the beginning of the spiritual new year and setting ourselves certain targets and goals and plans that can sustain us and that will sustain themselves until the next month of Ramadan. Inshallah, if we have tawfiq to live that long, we pray that we do. Okay, this was the first of multiple Shahr Ramadan specials. Please stay tuned for the rest of them and remember us in your dua, inshallah.